Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining the 2021 Asian American Luminary Award Seminar hosted by CIE USA Seattle Chapter. I am Angelina Huang, and I will be your host for our session today. This is one of the 4 seminars, and we are honored to have 2 of our 2020 AALA Award winners, Lan and Nyle, with us today to share their own leadership journey and how to transition from manager to leader. Before we begin, I would like to remind you this session will be recorded and ask that everyone other than the speakers to please mute your audio and keep your video off. Please post your question via the chat text and we will address them during Q&A. I'm honored to be your host today, and I look forward to introduce CIE to you and learning about the leadership transformation from our speakers. I understand we have many attendees joining from Asia, including staff from CIE Draco, and so thank you all for staying up till 2 a.m. to join us. Kudo and shout out for that. Our agenda today is very straightforward. We have budget time for Q&A, and as I mentioned earlier, submit them via chat window. For those who are new to CIE, CIE stands for Chinese Institute of Engineers. CIE was founded 104 years ago in 1917 and is a nonprofit professional organization of Chinese American engineers, scientists, and other professionals. The objective of CIE USA are to promote science, engineering, technology, and mathematics in all communities across the United States and provide recognition to the Asian Pacific American professionals at the national level. Currently, CIE has 7 regional chapters across the United States, serving over 10,000 members and alumni nationwide. At the U.S. national level, in conjunction with National E-Week, CIE USA hosts the renowned annual Asian American Engineering of the Year Award. This award creates a meaningful platform to recognize outstanding Asian American professionals in the area of STEM. Many of their achievements represent monumental breakthroughs in their respective fields, and their impacts are global and everlasting. At the international level, CIE co-hosts the biannual Sino-American Technology Engineering Conference. This event was first held 28 years ago in 1993 and organized in collaboration with the Chinese State Councils of People's Republic of China. The second co-hosted biannual event is the Modern Engineering and Technology Seminars, which was founded 55 years ago in 1966 in collaboration with Taiwan. Each year, CIE hosts programs and events such as Math and Science Competition, Youth Leadership Development Program in partnership with Bellevue Mirror Interns, Youth Scholarship Awards, and this year we are very happy to be sponsoring a new local robotic team, which is composed of 6 high school students and 6 middle school students. The team is competing in the First Tech Challenge robotic competition this season. By providing sponsorship, mentorship, and technical coaching to the team, CIE Seattle encouraged the Asian Heritage K-12 students to participate in state and nationwide STEM competitions. We continue to stay committed in honoring outstanding Asian American professionals and leaders through an annual Asian American Luminary Award program that we're celebrating today. This year, we are super excited to honor our 2020 AALA winners through this seminar series, and this is a short video celebrating our 2020 winners.
We are proud to present the recipients of the 2020 Third Annual Asian American Luminary Awards, hosted by the Chinese Institute of Engineers, USA Seattle Chapter. Distinguished Asian American Public Service Award, Conrad Lee, Bellevue City Council member and former mayor, for nearly 3 decades of public services and transforming Bellevue into one of the most prosperous desirable and welcoming global cities. Asian American Corporate Leadership Award, Lan Ye, Corporate Vice President of Microsoft, for leadership on a wide range of consumer and enterprise products and her far-reaching community services, including those during the recent global pandemic. Asian American Corporate Leadership Award, Nyle Miyamoto, Senior Director, Airplane Level Engineering Integration, The Boeing Company, for his instrumental contribution to the digital transformation and model-based engineering implementation in the Boeing Commercial Airplane Division, and for his tireless services for the Boeing Asian Professional Association and other professional organizations. Asian American Entrepreneurial Achievement Award, Christopher Ong, CEO of Voxa, for entrepreneurship in commercializing and analytical nanoscale imaging that transforms broad industries including microchips, drug therapies, and surgical implants. Asian American Science and Engineering Innovation Award, Ning Zhen, Professor and Howard Hughes Medical Institute investigator, University of Washington, for groundbreaking work in understanding how proteins interact with each other and with other biological molecules to mediate biological functions. Asian American Service and Leadership Award, Nelson Dong, partner of Dorothy and Whitney, for a long-lasting and permanent contribution to counseling a wide range of industries with unique expertise in domestic and international technology licensing, outsourcing, and manufacturing.
I would like to congratulate again to our 2020 award winners and take this opportunity to also thank our judges who contributed to the success of this program. Professor Jiahui Yan, Dean of College of Engineering at University of Washington. Judge Mark Chow, King County District Court. Ms. Janice Gent, Bellevue City Council member. Professor Ying-Hai Wang, the founding director of the Smart Transportation Application and Research Laboratory at University of Washington. And our Dr. Yiming Wang, corporate vice president and chief technology officer of AI at Microsoft. Let me now introduce our first speaker, Lan Ye. As the corporate vice president of Microsoft Teams Meetings and Device Group, Lan leads a team of program managers and engineers who are obsessed with making workplace communication simpler and more inclusive. Lan joined Microsoft out of college and worked on a variety of range of consumer and enterprise products, including Windows Media, digital rights management, Zoom, Windows Phone, mobile gaming, Skype, Link, and multiple incubation projects. In recent years, she led the conversions and transformations of Microsoft's unified communication strategy from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. Lan has a degree in both computer science and studio arts from Midbury College. The diversity of her degree and experience provided her with unique perspective in engineering delivery and product experience, where she can easily wear both hats. With that, I would like to pass the mic to Lan, who would take us through her talk on from manager to leader. Lan?
Hello. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Angelina. Happy New Year, first of all, everybody. Second day of the Chinese New Year, I think. 新年快乐，大家牛年大吉。First of all, thank you at CIE for inviting me for the seminar, and it's an honor to receive the award. Just a quick intro for myself. I'm the CVP of Microsoft. I lead a team of program managers and engineers for the Microsoft Teams calling meeting and devices organization. You're using the product that my team is building right now for this forum. So I'm very happy to be able to join you on using the exact software that we have been working on for the last few years. Just a little bit about my journey. I grew up in Shanghai and China. I came here for college. I went to a liberal arts college, Middlebury. Angelina already mentioned that I studied computer science and studio art. And after graduation, I came to Microsoft, spent nearly now 23 years. It's my 23rd year at Microsoft. It felt like an eye blink in a short amount of time. There we go. I worked in a variety of products in Microsoft, a very wide range of products on Microsoft. And most recent years, I was in charge of the most of our so-called unified communication product and business, leading to this point where we've transitioned our strategy to Microsoft Teams. So today I wanted to talk about my journey. When I joined Microsoft, I was an engineer, and over the years I transitioned to become a PM and then general manager and CVP. So it's quite a bit of a journey for me. So I thought it would be fun just to share about some of the learnings and reflections I have had from this journey, from how to, from manager to leader. It's a great topic. I wanted just to start with, something that I believe and truly deep in my heart. Leadership is a behavior, is a set of behaviors. They are not positions. If you look at the history of people who are perceived as most influential leaders in the history, they are not necessarily people who are in a leadership position. Of course, there are a lot of leaders who are in leadership position, but there are plenty examples where people are perceived as great leaders, not because of the post that they hold, but because of the behavior that they exhibited. A leader is usually someone who sees something that needs to be changed, and then they have the ability to envision a better future and rally people to make those changes. So there are three key things here. One is change, the other is vision, and the third is rallying the people. So how do you see something needs to be changed, have a vision, and rally people to get there? And if you think about the examples of the well-known leaders, like Dr. Martin Luther King, he saw the injustice and social inequality of Black people, and he started the human rights movement, which eventually led to the vision that he had to a more diverse and equal society. Same as Gandhi, where he saw the change that needs to be made because of the suppression of the British rule in India. And he started the nonviolence resistance movement, which led to the independence of India. So all of these leaders are really great examples of seeing something needs to be changed, rallying people, and then move towards the vision. So a lot of the things that I have learned along my journey throughout my career is, learning from the great leaders. And like I said, a lot of it is about behavioral difference. So I thought, I'll just go through some examples where, what would the skills of a manager, behaviors of a manager versus leader. And, they're not right or wrong. It's just different type of behavior depending on the type of position or how you want people to perceive you. So a manager tends to be in a position of control, and leader is more about influence. Some good examples, managers, if you're a manager, a good manager operate based on structure. There's always a hierarchy in any kind of institution or organization. Manager knows how to, hold people accountable, how to define responsibilities. They manage people and process. They are very good at organizing tasks and execute plans, which all lead to the outcome, which is delivering results. That's very straightforward managerial activities. Now, as a leader, by the way, these are not mutually exclusive. They could be augmenting, complementary to each other. As a leader, a key skill for leader or behavior pattern for leader is they can influence without authority. And to do that, they really need to motivate and enable others, because if you see something needs to be changed, and if you want people to move towards the vision that you have for a better reality, then you have to, human by nature has a great deal of inertia. So if you wanted other people to change along with you, then a great skill to have is how to motivate and how to get other people to support your cause. So the motivation and motivating and enabling is a key part of leadership behavior. A leader is also a lot about the ability to inspire ideas and imagination. It's not just your own ideas and imagination, it's also other people's ideas and imagination, because if you just execute on a predefined plan, there's not going to be change. There's not going to be a better future. So inspiration is always a key part of leadership attributes that we're looking for. And then as leader of an organization or of an institution or of a group community, it's super important to not just spend time inwardly trying to figure out, if you look at the left side of the activities, they're very inward facing. A leader needs to be outward facing as well. They know how to amplify the outcome. It's not just about delivering results, but also showing the impact, which then in a way, motivate and enable others, inspire ideas and imagination. So it creates that virtuous cycle. A good, I think, question to ask yourself is, how many people outside of your management or reporting hierarchy would come to you for advice or for help? It's not about people in your team who's looking for you for guidance and support. It's everybody around you, people outside of your reporting hierarchy. The more people who come to you for help and advice or bouncing off ideas, the more likely that you are being perceived as a leader. So I thought, one example I could give, just sort of from my own experience. I was working on a project when I was the group program manager for Windows Phone at the time, and I was working on actually bringing Xbox gaming into Windows Phone. This was never done in a company before. It was very difficult for a variety of reasons, business reasons, product, technology, etc. And at one point, my CVP told me and said, look, Lan, this is a great thing. We really need this, Xbox and Windows Phone coming together, but this is just too hard. We don't think this year is the year to do it. We should do it next year. That was my VP told me that. I was driving that project. I did not give up on that. I said, please put me into the room with people who don't believe that this can be done. Just put me in the room. I'll find out, where their concerns are. I'll figure out how to make it happen. So we did that. And against all the odds, eventually we shipped Xbox Live games on Windows Phone for the first time in the very first release of Windows Phone. That was, really, I think, very hard project to pull various parts of Microsoft to work together. But, one thing that I'm proud of is just, I did not do what other people told me to do. And I think that was important, especially, in some of the Asian cultures where there is a great deal of respect in hierarchy, in organization structure. And that's good. But, to be a true leader, you have to really, when it's the right time, when it's the right thing to do, not only operating within that hierarchy and structure. And that's where creativity will come from. That's where new value will be created. So that leads to my second sort of pair of behavior, measure versus create. If you look at managers, a typical managerial activities are defining goals and plans. And once you define goals, you establish a set of success metric, and then you work with the team to improve metrics. And based on the success, you track and you reward people for the outcome that they have delivered. And like with any plans, there's always a set of risks. So managers spend a lot of time trying to anticipate and manage those risks to ensure that the plan and execution delivers the expected outcome. As a leader, you have to behave differently. And again, I want to say these are not mutually exclusive. I lead a big organization. I still do a lot of my managerial activities, define goals, measure success, reward teams based on the success, managing risk. These are all great activities. But in order to grow into a leader, you have to carve out cycle and bandwidth for yourself to be able to pursue other activities. Examples are leaders should be great at discovering purposes and identity. Whether if you lead a group or an organization or community. I remember I used to read this really great quote from the father of WeChat, and he's just Zhang Xiaolong, I think that's his name. He's just such a great quintessential product manager, and he said something that really resonated with me. He said, it's not his exact words, it's sort of my translated version of it. He said, third grade team are bound by contracts. So, you have plans, you have goals, and, you deliver those, and I will reward you. That's sort of more or less of a contractual relationship. Second grade teams are bound by shared goals. When you manage a larger team, people will have different motivations and drives. So it's important for everybody to come together, have a set of shared goals and shared outcome. That's important. That's super important for cross-group, cross-team collaboration. But the first grade team is bound by a shared sense of purpose and belief. And that's super important because, in a very dynamic industry and market, your goals and your goals and outcome may have to change because where the market is moving, where the competitor is going. But if, your team and the community is bound by a shared sense of purpose, then no matter what the condition changes, they will still have a sense of direction and orientation. So, as a leader, it's super important to define that purpose and find identity for the team. It may sound intangible, but it's actually those kind of intangible beliefs that bonds people together. And a leader also should spend a fair amount of time, not just looking at how am I executing on the current plan, but what can I do to generate new value? And that's so important and vital to the growth of an organization, growth of a business. So, once you find ways to create new value, then how do you drive and incentivize growth? Because like I said, humans always have this inertia of stability and no change. It gives comfort. Change always creates discomfort. So as a leader, you have to intentionally to create those incentives of change. And similarly, change always comes with risks. So in addition to manage risks as a manager, as a leader, you also need to have the courage to take risks. If we always play it safe, there will be no growth and no new value created. A good way of, sort of gauge yourself as well is to think about how much time you typically spend in the what and how versus the what if. The what if question is really where you start to challenge the status quo and think about different ways to create value, to do things that hopefully, will instigate changes towards a better vision. Super, super important. And then the last set of behavior pairs that I'll talk about is order and chaos. Sorry, let me just get rid of the, oops. Yeah. Managers, we spend a lot of time looking to minimize turns and disruptions. When you manage a team, your team expects you to bring stability, to remove ambiguity, and so they can then execute on a plan. And in the process of doing that, a lot of time managers rely on processes to bring order, right? If something is chaos or if something is ambiguous, then let's create a process to make sure that the steps are memorized and documented and institutionalized. That's a great function for managers. They also have the risk, when you define processes and you sort of pivot a lot of your operation based on processes, then there is a risk of sort of operating from a tunnel vision, basically, focusing on the area of ownership within your charter, but because you're really, really focusing on optimizing within that compartmentalized ownership. And then, a lot of the implementation tactics could take up a lot of time of managers. And this is, again, these are all not wrong activities. It's just, as you consider transition from manager to leader, think about the time you spend on some of these managerial activities versus leadership behavior. So on the leadership side, as you transition from manager to leader, what one thing that I found super helpful for me is just this ability to embrace chaos and ambiguity. And when chaos and ambiguity came and overwhelm the team or a situation, it's very natural for us as managers want to just make the chaos go away, because nobody like chaos, nobody like instability. But sometime as a leader, you actually have to be the contrary. You have to embrace chaos, because as the scope of your problem, the problem that you manage becomes bigger, the team becomes bigger, you will find that chaos and ambiguity is actually a constant. It's not something that will come and go. It's always going to be part of your job. If you think about the president of the United States, the kind of problem space that he manages never, or she never, is going to be in neat order. Everything is going to be chaos and ambiguity all the time. Same as in the technology industry, where we are in such a dynamic era that I've long learned that don't come to work and expect no surprises. Every day, there's never a dull moment. So you have to adjust your mentality as you transition from manager to leader, is to be okay with the fact that chaos and ambiguity is a constant, and I will embrace it. And the way, to handle it is not necessarily to make them go away, but to help your team find pockets of clarity, in pockets of clarity that they can anchor themselves on. And to do that, you have to develop a set of principles, not necessarily processes, right? When there are a lot of things coming our way and we need to handle all of them, what are the most important thing that I want the team to focus on? And it's not about process, it's about how we prioritize, how we focus, and that really need a principled and disciplined approach. And that will help drive clarity. And the other thing as leaders in the midst of chaos is to not lose the bird's eye view. It's very easy, again, to get dragged into tunnel vision, your own compartmentalized ownership. But as a leader, your team count on you to maintain that big picture view, to have that court vision. It's my favorite position in a basketball game is the person that will have the control of the court, and that's where they're looking for court vision, right? being able to see and read the landscape and see where is hot, where is the opportunity, and be able to direct the team towards that. And that bird's eye view is super important. It's very easy to lose that when you sort of get engulfed in the everyday fire drills and crisis. And all of those, I think, are important principles. The bird's eye view and a mentality to embrace chaos is essential for a leader to develop strategy. You cannot think clearly, cannot have a long-term vision if you don't have a calm state of mind, if you don't develop principles, and if you don't understand and read the landscape all the time. So, while developing strategy is a behavior that people expect of leader, but really what enables it is a lot of these everyday sort of approach, how you approach your everyday situation that will help give you that clarity of mind. When I'd like to just use questions as well. One of the things I'd encourage you to think about as a leadership attribute is when there's a crisis, do you spend, does your team perceive you as a hammer or a harbor? And, a hammer approach is when crisis comes, I'm going to try to, knock every nail and just put them in order, right? I don't, I wanted to get everybody to work on the same thing, work on the same process, and just put out the fire. And then some people could get pretty aggressive when crisis come, and they'll lose cool. They'll be super. I always say it's a pass through for pressure, right? You basically pass through whatever pressure to your team so that they get things done by sort of operating under this kind of pressure. In a safe harbor approach, human really don't operate well under fear, under pressure. So it's a good test for leadership when there's a lot of crisis. Can you keep calm? Can you behave like you are the anchor for the team? They'll come for you for a lot of constraints, a lot of difficulties, a lot of personal challenges, but can you turn them around? Can you keep people in a calm state of mind without fear and still operating? Can you provide that clarity for them? That's very, very important as for someone to be perceived as a leader. And again, you don't have to be in a leadership position to be perceived as a leader. When my personal experience for this COVID journey, that was pretty insane for my team. Actually, when we started the nationwide lockdown, I think it was sometime around March last year. Microsoft decided to send everybody home very, very early on, and I work on this product, Microsoft Teams, which obviously was in hot demand. It's sort of the bullseye of the storm, eye of the storm. So, it was everything coming our way, right? The customer, really desperately trying to figure out how to get onto our product so that they can keep their business going. Our team members are struggling, for various reasons. People go home, they're caught by surprise, they don't have childcare, they have family members that are falling ill, and they worry about their own well-being because of the workload. So it was, and we have a lot of competitive pressure in the market as well. So it was a perfect storm situation, a lot of chaos, obviously. I think what really, bound us together as a team and pulled through this, almost year-long fire drill is a sense of purpose, is, just the support the team felt from across the Microsoft and our leadership team as well, on giving us the room to figure out a plan, a strategy, how to tackle this situation. And I spend a lot of time trying to get the team to, focus on a set of very clear areas that really will move the needle and make a difference. If we try to do everything that every customer is asking us coming our way, I'm pretty sure I'll burn out my team very, very soon. So, it's that combination of approach that helped us pulling through. So, I wanted to just quickly perhaps just go through a few of the skills I think are super important as you think about leadership development. And there's probably a very long list of skills that would be helpful for leadership, but I'm just going to call out three that I think has been helpful for me in my journey. First one is emotional control. It's there's I already said a lot about chaos and are you a hammer versus harbor? A lot of it is really on you. You as a leader, I think as your scope and team gets bigger, the burden for you to have a great deal of emotional control becomes even bigger, because you cannot behave like you are an IC or a small team manager, because anything you do, any words you say will have an amplified impact, not just on the business, but also on the individual that works either within your team or around you. So how do you model your own behavior? People will model your behavior. How you behave yourself will have profound impact on the organization culture that you have. So, like I said, people don't operate well in fear, and you want your team to trust you. And so the first order of business is emotional control, and there's a lot of trainings that you could do as well. But just some very simple rules, to have great deal of emotional controls needs to start with recognizing your trigger. What are the kind of things that triggers you? There's no better way to control yourself to start with awareness. And that's really, number one, is to be aware. There may be other, words other people said, things other people do, unique style of communication, the pace of, speed at which people move, where people are sort of human is wired with a lot of different triggers for emotional responses. And some are happy triggers, some are really frustrating triggers. So recognizing that is super important. For me, what triggers me is incompetency or relinquent of responsibility. If, I see other people don't do their job, don't try hard enough to do their job, it triggers me, it makes me frustrated. But again, as a leader, you cannot just let your frustration come through directly, because it tends to put other people on defense. And, then we get into this negative emotional spin, and, it'll just not get anywhere. So you always would try to recognize those triggers and figure out ways then to turn this into positive and constructive conversation. And, we're all humans, and sometimes you will get triggered, and, the more you can be aware of it, then I think you have to practice how do you hold those kind of anxiety, right? When you feel frustrated, when you are angry, or when you suspect other people are out there trying to get to you, hold this anxiety. Don't let those come out of you. Try to hold it for a while. Let it boil for a while, and see if you can handle it. That's a way of building emotional resilience. And even if you can't, sometimes you will have a blip, and you will flip. Own your feelings. When I get frustrated, sometimes I may not behave at my best. I'll apologize, and I'll tell my team, sorry, that was a moment of unnecessary frustration. I sometimes tell people, look, I don't think I'm in the right mood to have this discussion right now. I need some time, to step away from this, and I'll come back to it. But it's okay to admit your feeling and own it, as long as you're committing to deal with it and try to figure out how to build more resilience. And the other thing that's super, super, super important is to assume positive intent. In Microsoft, we are really, there's a few things that we're looking for in leader. One of the key attributes we're looking for is, can you generate positive energy? And it's not just a cliche. It makes huge difference in times of crisis. I already mentioned quite a bit about this. But you cannot generate positive energy if you don't start with assuming positive intent. I think human nature, whenever you see something, hear something, it's very natural for people to start infer and try to extrapolate some conspiracy theories, from certain people's behavior. And those are really toxic and poisonous to your mind. I try to take those away and try to always start from the ground of other people. If they say something that looked wrong or sort of evil intention, I'm sure they're missing something. They have some context that I don't understand. Let me try to understand them. If you start from a positive intent perspective, you will find that having a constructive collaboration would be much easier. And last goes without saying is practicing self-control. All of these, recognizing trigger, anxiety, own feeling, that needs a lot of practice. I think that's why also, when people get older, they become more calm, because you've really been gone through a lot of practices along the way, either consciously or subconsciously. And the other attribute I think that's super important is vulnerability, just the ability to, there's a really great book that I'd encourage you to give a read if you haven't. It's called Dare to Lead. It's by Brene Brown, and she's done a lot of TED Talks as well around this topic of vulnerability. And I think it's also counterintuitive in some of the Asian cultures, because we tend to think of leaders as those people who have authority. So therefore, it's always important to demonstrate authority, demonstrate strength, and it's a weakness if you start making yourself vulnerable. That's not how human nature works. I have learned this a lot of ways. The kind of leaders that you typically look yourself to is people who you feel like you can relate to them. And if you want to make people, feel relate to you, then you have to, be open and honest and be authentic about who you are. And, everybody has strength and weakness. It's okay to admit those and make yourself more relatable. They will help build trust. They will show, to the contrary of, common belief, showing vulnerability actually is a way of showing strength of character, because you're not insecure about your weakness. You're open to talk about it, and you are open to invite other people to help you. And that means that, someone is feel comfortable about themselves, no sense of insecurity. And they foster creativity as well. When you open people for problem solving, that's where a lot of the creativity comes from. And the last one I'll wrap up real quick is just storytelling. It's such an important skill. These are my favorite slides. I used to follow this blog site called presentationzen.com. They do a lot of dissects on storytelling skills, and this was one that they did. On the left side, you see this is a set of slides that Steve Jobs used for one of the Apple conferences where they unveiled new products. I think it was new Mac. And on the right-hand side is a set of slides that Bill Gates used in one of the early days when he was still the CEO of Microsoft in an industry conference called CEO Connection. And you can see the difference in storytelling styles. And, I think this is something becomes increasingly important as you transition from manager to leader, because, a manager, you have the comfort of working with your team. They know who you are. They know what we're doing. They know how we're going to do it. And you can, very easily, people will follow along what you're saying because you're all on the same ground. You understand the space, you share the context. But as leader, increasingly, you're going to need to communicate a lot of your vision, your call for change to people outside of people who report to you. So how do you get others to listen to you, to be inspired and follow you? And that requires a great deal of storytelling. And it's not necessarily about pretty words, big words, or pretty pictures. It's really about the clarity in story, the simplicity in how you send a message, and the repeatability, right? If you want people to amplify your story, can they take your story and tell other people with a lot of fidelity? Just like the Gandhi non-resistant, nonviolent movement. It's such a simple story that everybody can, or the Martin Luther King, I have a dream. Those type of story is so repeatable. People can, become storytellers on your behalf. So, that is also one of the leadership attributes that we look at, growing and promoting leaders in Microsoft, is called the ability to synthesize complexity. When you are dealing with a highly complex, highly ambiguous situation or business problem, how can you make that simple? How can you simplify that so you can help other people, other team, your leaders make decisions? Because not a lot of people have the time and luxury to go through slides and documents of thousands of words to get to a point of decision making. So synthesizing complexity, storytelling, there's lots of tools out there that you can look for. If you want suggestions, I can give you as well. But it's just a skill that I think is super important to focus on. With that, I'm wrapping up. This is all the content I have, and thank you for your time. I'm hoping this is useful, and my contact information is here. Happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Lan. That was a really insightful talk, and I think I really resonated with a lot of your key points about recognizing triggers, assuming positive intent, owning the feelings, and hold the anxiety. And I think it's the one thing to call out, and I think the theme of today's session is about manager to leader. And I think from a manager's perspective, it's really easy to get focused on activities and works that need to get done. But as a leader, you need to be motivational. You need to keep yourself in check because of the impact that you have with a larger group of people. So really appreciate the summary. And I've already seen some questions coming through in our chat window, but we will hold them till the Q&A session so that we make sure we give Nyle enough time to also cover his material as well. Let me go ahead and show my screen. And as intro, as a senior director for airplane level engineering integration and chief tech architect for Boeing processing and tools, Nyle leads the engineering digital transformation initiative and is the functional engineer leader for airplane integration, product lifecycle management, and system engineering. Prior to this assignment, Nyle was named the first additive manufacturing chief engineer for commercial airplanes. Nyle has held other positions as director for structured product development, structures design chief engineer, as well as a chief engineer for Boeing 747, 767 airframe and cargo design center. Nyle is a graduate of Washington State University's Master of Engineering Management program and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Washington. With that, I'll pass the mic to Nyle, who will take us through his talk on the leadership formula. Nyle?
Thank you, Angelina. Okay, we'll just jump right into this. And just a little bit more about myself. I grew up in Hawaii, in a very small town in Kona on the Big Island. And then I left home at 18, came to the University of Washington, and graduated there with a mechanical engineering degree and went to work for Boeing. And I have been at Boeing now for, this month will make 30 years. So it's been a very long time. I've worked on a number of different programs, as Angelina mentioned. And through that time, I've kind of lost track of how many different management and leadership roles I've had. And I've moved around a lot and gained a lot of experience. And so what I want to do today is just share as much of that as I can with you. So we go next. And so really I have one goal today, and that's to share what I've learned. And I know this is being recorded, so obviously that might make you think about how you ask a question. But I like to always start these presentations with Vegas rules apply, which is in this environment, ask the question that maybe you haven't been comfortable asking your boss or your coworkers. And I think that Lana and I will try to answer, right? And because this is CIE, it is my take on this. We'll also have a flavor around what is it for Asians that might be different. So we'll take a look at some of that. I want to start a little bit with the state of where Asian Americans are in the United States today. And if you look at US Census data, Asian Americans are now the fastest growing ethnic group in the United States. They are the highest educated ethnic group in the United States. And they also have the highest per capita income. So by all of those measures, Asian Americans are doing really well in the United States. One thing that is interesting is there is also, though, the highest income inequality gap. So the very poorest of Asian Americans versus the top earners, there's the biggest disparity of all those ethnic groups. But the challenges are that even though in many tech companies in the United States, Asians are well represented in the workforce, that's true of Boeing, and I think of a lot of other corporations that I engage and work with. Asians are very underrepresented in management and executive positions, and and so this is what we see as a kind of a consistent thing. Whether doing really well at a professional level, you don't see that ability to move up in the organizations, and I think Asian women are especially underrepresented in those positions. So we look at this next chart from Ascend, and so Ascend recently put out this a white paper called Race, Gender, and the Double Glass Ceiling. And it's really interesting. You can go find it, I'm sure, on their website and sign up for their newsletter is how I found it. But what they have is something called the Executive Parity Index. And that is, they just took the percentage of executives divided by the percentage of professionals in the corporations that they analyzed, and they were able to get EEO data on. And the EPI by race, when you see this, you can see how Asians and African Americans are really, well, all Hispanics as well, are very underrepresented in these executive positions. And then when you break that down even further by gender, you can see how, again, just like all of corporate America, women are even more underrepresented. And then when you take that down into minorities, it becomes even worse. So part of this today is really about just talking about those things that might be influences in uh, in preventing that all of these minority groups from achieving that parity. Okay, go next. So if there's nothing else you can take away from today, this is what um, I tend to talk the most about in all these talks like this that I do. And I call it the leadership potential formula. And it's something that I just kind of came up with. It started with a friend of mine who also did motivational talks to groups. And we worked on it and kind of modified it a little bit. And I've kind of come to this where it's three things. It's experience times the relationships times your reputation. And those are multipliers. I've asked many times by people, is it plus? Do you add these things up? And my answer is no, it's actually a multiplier, because if you take 1 times 1 times 0, you get 0. And all of these are really important for you as a leader. So first, the experience is pretty easy. It's what you bring to the table, right? It's your educational background, it's the work experiences you have, it's your cultural background, it's whatever you bring into the workplace. But your relationships are, some people would say this is your network. And I think network is one part of your relationship. But when I think of relationships, I think of how you define that and the strengths of those relationships. So if you think of it like a spectrum, where a relationship could be someone, we know each other and we know each other by name, but that's about it, to maybe you work for one of your parents, right? That's about as strong a relationship as you can get. So in a professional environment, it's usually somewhere in between. And what does that look like? What is your relationship with the people around you, with your employees, with your bosses? We all know these stories of these old boys clubs, and leaders who get together, maybe play tennis or golf together on the weekends. And so you think of the kinds of relationships that you build in those environments, that's often much stronger and much deeper than the relationships you might have just being in meetings with someone or being a coworker. So the stronger your relationships, the stronger your leadership potential. And the last one on here is your reputation. And I think of this as, what is it that people say about you when you are not in the room? And because you're not in the room, you don't know what they're saying. So the hard part and the thing that you need to go figure out is, what are they saying about you? What do people think uh, of you as a reputation? And so the way you figure that out is you go back to your relationship. You go and find the people you trust, find the people who you know will be honest and will give you that information, right? Tell you about what people say about you, tell you what they perceive you to be like as a leader. And that knowledge is what will really help you to grow, because sometimes that's really painful. I know I've experienced over the years, I've been able to find the people who are really willing to tell me what my reputation is. And often it's surprising and often it was painful to hear, but it helped me to grow as a leader because then I could adjust. If I was being perceived a certain way, and often because of cultural differences, my perception of my reputation and what others thought of me was very different. And so by having that knowledge, then I was able to adjust that reputation and or adjust my behavior and change that reputation over time. Okay, let's keep going. Hopefully you can all read this. I know it's a little small on my screen, but I want you and to engage all of you. And so feel free to take yourselves off of mute if you want to give a comment here. But this is just a little fun here. So there are 2 employees on here where I received emails from, and one of them is Asian. So I want you to tell me who you think is the Asian employee. So on the first, it's very short. It says, "Hey, now, how time flies. Last time you and I had a chance to chat was a few years ago. Now that you're leading this additive manufacturing thing, I'm excited. If you have some time, I'd like to set up a one-on-one and learn more about it." The next employee says, "Hey, I'm not sure if you remember me. We met up a couple of times. I'm a graduate of this university. Sorry to bother you. I know you must be extremely busy, but I recently watched this Lunch and Learn video where you discussed it. I'm interested in it." And then I'm going to skip down a little bit. You have a little bit, I do have a little bit of experience in this. I don't have a ton of experience in the more technical aspects, but if you're busy and can't meet, I understand. But if you have time, I'd really appreciate meeting with you. Thank you. Right. So which do you think is the Asian employee? Someone take yourselves off mute. Or maybe Stephen or Andrew.
Employee 2.
Number 2.
Okay, why? What gave it away?
It's kind of like myself.
What is that? How would you say yourself? What would you?
Because when I write email with a person I'm not so familiar with, I would start with, I sort of be appreciation of the time, the consideration. So it's like kind of an Asian gentle way, and not like the first one is very American, just straightforward.
Right, right.
Yeah, what do I want?
So
may not be myself now, but definitely I can see myself there in the employee too.
And I catch myself doing this even now. Even as an executive, I rewrite things a lot because I realize, okay, it's too long, or it's too humble, I guess. Which actually, does anybody else want to comment? Okay, why don't we go? We'll go down and we'll talk about which employee vision. Okay, one more, and we'll talk a little bit about these traits. And this is actually a coworker and I started putting this together. He's also an Asian executive, recently retired from Boeing, and he actually started with 3 H's, and I added one. And what we said was, there are these 4 H words that really apply as archetypes for a lot of Asian and Pacific Islanders, and that's hard work, harmony, hierarchy, and humility. And I think you could see a lot of those in that last email from that Asian employee. It's about, there's a lot of humility in it, and he's very respectful of the sort of hierarchy. And I see this a lot in Asian employees. And what I would encourage all of you to think about is, if we go down one real quick, um, it it's what are these archetypes, and do they help or hinder your career growth and reputation? And in many ways, obviously, hard work. We all want having to have employees who are hard workers. Uh, but is there, in a cultural sense, where Asians maybe take it farther than their American counterparts, and or their, I shouldn't say American counterparts, maybe their white counterparts, and therefore, if you're viewed a little differently, right? Your reputation becomes more behind the scenes or quieter. I hear this a lot when I'm in meetings and we're talking about different Asian leaders, and it's, well, they're the quiet hard worker, and but that's not always the one that everybody wants to promote. So I think it's not that these are all bad. In fact, they're all wonderful archetypes and traits to have. You just have to think about them in the context of the workplace you're in, and think about sort of the baseline that the others have versus where you fall, and take that into account as you're growing as a manager into a leader. Okay. So here's a few characteristics that I've collected over time, and it's a long list. And I know from a time standpoint, I'll just kind of go through these quickly, and you guys can think about them and go back and take a look later. But experience, again, broad experience. The better you have, I think, moving from when we think of managers to leaders at the Boeing Company, the broader your experience, that's who we're looking to be able to move up, right? If they're very narrow, very technical in one area, it's hard to move you more broadly, or put you over a larger organization that has more responsibility. So being able to expand that technical knowledge, um, and also view an organization from kind of a bigger picture. It's funny, we get into these interviews and we'll say, well, this person sounds like a manager. And it's what we're describing is that individual is very focused maybe on their team and the work that they're responsible for, and what they do, but they don't see and can't describe how that influences or has an impact on the larger organization. So really, one of those things about moving to leader is seeing that bigger picture, being able to look more broadly across an organization and outside your organization, and understand how that influences things. Just like before, behaviors. Oh, if we go back real quick, I'm sorry. Let me just go down a couple more here. Behaviors, being adaptable is really important, and always remember that you should be thinking about your comparison to your peers. So, what is your value relative to those around you, and what kind of impact you have on your organization? Lon talked a lot about this. Are you considered a thought leader? Are you someone that people come to for advice? And that's down below. The influence in the organization. Do people come to you for advice? And if they don't, maybe you need to be asking yourself why not. I like the term up, down, and around, and that is, as a leader or as a manager, you balance the leadership that you have, both managing up your bosses, down to your team, and around you with your peers. And if you can do all three of those well, it's really difficult to do all three well. But we all know people around us who manage well up, right? They seem to only be focused on their bosses and making them happy. Their team doesn't like them a lot of times, and their peers don't think much of them. So, but you have to find a balance, and maybe that's the harmony part and the benefit of being Asian is, how can you find that balance and manage well in all three of those directions. Okay, so a couple more things here. One is, I would say, remember that it's always a competition. That whether you like it or not, you're always being compared. And so, are you better than your coworkers and even those friends that you have at work? Um, because that's how leaders are above you are thinking about you in terms of roles, right? They're having to decide if there's a promotion opportunity, a new assignment. They're going to have to pick someone, and so, are you the one that they're going to pick, and why is that? And are you in that competitive realm? So I always think of in Asian cultures, including my own family, academics are very important, and there's that old joke about we're Asians, not vegans, and so but when you get into the workplace, really no one cares about your grades anymore, right? No one cares about your SAT score, and that's really I think the difference that happens is now the measure of how you do and whether you are leadership potential becomes not about your academic achievements, but a much more broader set of evaluation criteria. And so um, that kind of leads to the next one is I believe you really have to develop what I call multi-dimensional relationships. And though that is um, a mix of work and personal life and interest. And I'll use an example, to Lan's example about storytelling. I had an employee, a manager that worked for me a few years ago. She's an Asian female, and whenever we met and talked, we got straight to business. She talked about the issues her team was having, the help she needed, how the status of how her group was doing, and that's all we ever talked about. And one day I went to her office and I sat down and I looked behind her and I said, I think you have two kids, but I don't really know because you've never talked about them. You've never, I don't know if how old they are, what they like to do, because we only talk about this. And that was a lot of the perception about her from others around, other leaders, is that they didn't really know her. They didn't. She was sort of one dimensional, and that's why I say you need to have these multi-dimensional relationships, and that's what develops that depth of relationship. So think about how you chit chat, how you engage in conversation, and are you willing to share some elements of your personal life or your culture, and develop those strong relationships with those around. And then the thing that comes up a lot in conversations I have with Asian employees is accent. And it's one of those sort of vaguest things people don't want to ask. And I say that, and if you look at the definition of an accent, it's a physical inability to make certain sounds. That's all it is. It's a physical inability to make a certain sound. So if you learn another language after about the age of 10, these linguists will say you will most likely have an accent that is discernible by native speakers because certain sounds that are learned at an early age are hard to develop later because your physical ability to make those sounds isn't like a native speaker. So my comment is don't ever let that stop you. Don't ever let it stop you from communicating. One of my favorite stories is I have a senior technical leader in the organization that I have worked with for many years. He grew up in Hong Kong. He came here in a high school age, and he has a heavy Hong Kong accent, but he never lets it stop him from communicating. And he just by nature talks really fast. And sometimes I'll have to tell him to slow down, but he just never thought about it. He's not self-conscious of it. He just communicates, and he's done really really well. And so I just encourage all of you not to let that hold you back, and to really communicate whatever you need to do. Okay. So these last couple of slides, I usually do this when I'm in person talking, and I'll bring a prop. This is the first time I'm trying to do them with slides. It's not really, it doesn't have the same effect, but we'll give it a shot anyway. So the closing of my talk is really about your image and how are you perceived. So this is a bottle of a liter of water. I just put a picture of it on my desk, and I call it Pud water. So it's tap water, right? If you think of water, it's essential for life, and we can't do anything without it, right? So it's something that we all have to have, and if you look at the cost in most municipal water systems, a liter of water is about a tenth of a cent. So it's a great value. We use it for everything, right? And it provides life. Okay, next chart. And what I want you to think about is this is a bottle of Fiji water. Fiji water costs about $3 a liter. That makes it 3,000 times more expensive than tap water. Now it's great, and I drink it, and once in a while I'll buy it. It's not a very good deal, but it does taste good. But it's water. It comes in this really beautiful package, and that maybe is what makes it different. But people, right? It's in every Starbucks around the world. You can find Fiji water. It comes from we're calling it from Seattle. 6,000 miles away from these beautiful islands of Fiji. But it's 3,000 times. It's more expensive than gasoline. It's more expensive than, I mean, it's, when you think about it, it's just water. And really, what is it? It's a package. So if we go one more, and really, this is just my closing message to all of you. When you go back in the office, when this pandemic is over and we do start returning back to our workplaces, which one are you going to be? If you think of it as just water, but it's the wrapper that it comes in and what's the value that you put on it. So that is my closing message to you. And I want to say Happy New Year to everyone, and we'll turn it back over to Angelina. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Before we dive, thank you so much, Niall. We're going to go ahead and get started Q&A session shortly. But before we do that, I believe Stephen is going to share his screen. We're going to ask everyone who joined the session. We have about, at the highest point, about 65 people. But if you're still on the call, could you turn on your video? And we're going to do a group photo. And this is one of my favorite time for these webinar series. And I have to say to you, Lan, when you did the new feature where everyone could be in the same classroom, it was one of the biggest things in my teams. Like, we looked like we actually sit together, and that, you know, something as simple as that, from square boxes to actually be able to sit together, was very, very great experience for us. So continue to be creative, and I will let Stephen take the photo. And if you could please turn on your video. This is one time we actually let people turn on their videos. Wow.
Okay, look at the camera and say cheese. Okay, I got one. You guys go ahead and ask a question.
Okay. Let's see. I'll start off with, we have a bunch of questions that came through, and I see Lance is answering them already. But let's go ahead and open with one where that would be very interesting to hear from our speaker is, who is your favorite leader and why?
I don't keep a favorite list. I actually just mentioned this the other day in another podcast I did with a friend. I had recently I had an experience. I joined an Airbnb experience that this Olympic athlete, Paralympian athlete called Lex Gillette. He is a blind athlete, and he's a long jumper, 4-time Olympic medalist. So just, you know, we're trying to, he's offering basically a talk on Airbnb, and you can sign up to show, you know, basically share his journey. It was really awe-inspiring because, you know, the guy was blind since 8 years old, and he had this quote called, "If you have a vision, you don't need sight," which is something that really has guided him throughout his journey. And he showed us how he, you know, used this vision and how he, you know, helped navigate him through the world. And, you know, to me, that's really a great leader because, and by the way, he's also a musician. He released an album, and he, you know, played pianos. So, you know, you look at someone with his personal condition, but, you know, he just persevered through all these hardship. And a lot of things I talked about today, you know, embrace chaos. You know, can you imagine being a blind person, not being able to see anything? There's no greater degree of chaos than that. And, you know, I talked about influence versus control. You know, you really are out of control a lot of time when you don't have your sight, but he was able to create a great, you know, not just his own career, but also a lot of inspiration for many other people. You know, that's really influencing. And, you know, he's not just sort of following whatever life's path that he was led to. He created the new path for himself and become a world-class long jumper in ways that, you know, people probably would given up already. So all of these attributes really was inspiring to me. And I think a lot of people, again, it goes to my position, leader doesn't necessarily have to be a position. It's a behavior.
I will have to go look him up. Thank you. Thanks, Lan. I would say what I always tell my family is I would say that for me it's Michelle Obama, and it's like if there's a bucket list of someone I want to meet, it would be Michelle Obama. I just think of her as a very charismatic and inspirational leader, and for me that's what I really look up to, is someone who I'm inspired to follow, and I want to be like that person. So I guess
Thank you.
Yeah. And Michelle Obama doesn't have a position either.
Yeah, that's right.
It's right. It's her behavior.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I will go ahead and start with some of the Q&A that came through. Limin asked, Asian American is heavily ignored in American politics and industry management. Any suggestion on working together on it?
I think that what I always think, and the reason I do some of these talks is increase the pipeline, right? A lot of times you'll hear this, that I look at it at the Boeing company, when we look at our management structure, about 1 in 10 managers becomes an executive. And so if you don't increase people in the pipeline, you don't put more people into the mix, then you're not going to change the dynamic at the top. And in order to change at the top, one thing I've learned over time is you have to have a seat at the table. And until I've gotten higher in the organization and been able to have a seat at the table, nobody's hearing my voice. Nobody is hearing the Asian American experience. And so nobody is helping to educate others and change that. And I think that's the part that is important. And kudos to Lan also for coming here today, because I don't always see Asian leaders being that voice, being that advocate, being those who are out trying to help others to achieve and get higher. And it's really going to be all about increasing that pipeline for me.
Yeah, and I think I'm sort of a beneficiary of this, right? Microsoft has very consciously, we have a very conscious effort on diversity and inclusion, including increasing representation. On one end, I feel very comfortable of the career that I've gone through. I don't think it's a result of D&I, but I do think that it is increasing the representation really helps to open the door for a lot of, whether if it's Asian, and we're also looking at female as well, which is another often underrepresented group, especially in the high-tech industry. I also think that it takes grassroots as well. I'm always the kind of person that believe you don't want to fall victim to the circumstances. No matter how disadvantaged, how sort of underprivileged a person is, you always need to find ways to find things that's within your control, and find ways to get out of the situation. In the early days of Microsoft, it's a pretty harsh environment for women, or Asian women especially, and also I'm not a traditional engineer. I very early on I switched to become product management, so it is not a traditional engineering track. So in that community, you mostly find white men throughout the years, and for me it's just like, well, I'm gonna be better at these people at what I'm doing, and that's how I. But the important thing though is that. I'm very glad Nyle brought up, I was kind of inspired as well with Nyle's talk, is the attributes of Asian, and certain attributes, like we got to be conscious about making changes, because if you want to make your voice heard, you can't stay quiet. You have to be vocal about, your needs, your wants, and make it heard, as long as it's, got rational. It's rational, and it's for the greater good of the business. Get your voice heard. I believe that's important. in addition to just, institutional, structure to help increase the representation in pipeline.
That's great. And then I think going back to what Nile was talking about, increasing the pipeline, ties into very well with the next question where Zach shared that he is watching this webinar with his daughter, Miranda, who is a computer science major freshman in college. Kudos, Miranda, we need more pipeline. I'm going to read the question because even though I know Lan had answered them in the chat window, but for folks who might be watching this recording later on, can also have visibility to the inside. So Miranda's question was, how do you prepare yourself to become a good leader while you were in college? May I have some advice from you from my college life in the next 3 years to work on this goal while I work towards my academic success?
Yeah, so I responded in the chat already. I can tell you that from my experience at Microsoft, the most valuable skills that I've gained in college is really the development of a whole person. I study. I'm very happy that as Angelina, you introduced, I had a double major in computer science and studio art. My art education actually really have grounded me and helped tremendously in my career here at Microsoft because, like I mentioned, leaders is about inspiring people, is about, overcome chaos and ambiguity. And all of those, it's, if you think about the methods for doing this is a lot about art, the art of how to deal with people, right? And it's not so much about the science of the code that you need to write, in the end of the day. So a lot of my education, spent time on investing in communication skills, writing skills, and appreciation for culture, art, religion. Kyle mentioned, how do you develop a multiplex relationship with people? So, you become an interesting topic, right? You can bring interesting topic to the table, but it has to start with you have a curiosity about things around you, not just your field of study, and also develop a deep understanding of human behavior, why people, think and behave certain ways. In art, in my school, when I was doing art, a lot of time we just stand in the room and watch other people's artwork and trying to figure out what is this person trying to express? Is there any positive or negative things that we can read from it, right? And those kind of sort of human reading experiences was super beneficial for me at work, because I can pick up, when somebody I can sense frustration, I can sense resistance. And in a lot of cases, I found that was an advantage for me, right? Because you got a lot of these type A executives or male in the room, they tend to overlook a lot of these signals and then makes a lot of these collaboration much more difficult. And I think that was something that I had this unique combination where I can take both a science and art approach to a problem space and understand human and technology. That's super helpful from just career growth and also your personal well-being perspective.
That's awesome. And then I think it's awesome that you share your experience from being in computer science and the studio arts. The podcast you referenced, I actually watched it. And my 13 years at Microsoft, kudos Microsoft, you're the first person I ever heard someone describe Microsoft as Disneyland. And funny, I was watching late at night and I laughed so loud that my daughter's like, "Are you okay?" And I think that's the perspective in life and how we engage on things we do, how we engage our friends, whether through college, through professional careers. It is so valuable to have the right mindset. And because, like you said, if you bring that mindset and the energy, others sees it and feels it. So thank you. Our next question is directed at Nile, and it comes from Chris. Chris happened to be not only CEO of Voxa, but also our seminar speaker from the very first one, and 2020 AALA award winner as well. Chris asks, in competitive environment, what are ways to spot and unlock the friction due to toxic competitiveness at a manager and both leader levels?
That's actually a really tough one. I think, I think the benefit, kind of back to those 4-H's with, I think Asians, there is the harmony part, right? And I find I encounter a lot of that there's very competitive other leaders around, but sometimes going back to that Asian trait of bringing some harmony is respected, right? Because people can sense this competitiveness, and by using those skills to bring people together, I think that also helps to move a team forward when things do get to competitive and there's different factions, vying for leaders, money, funding, whatever it is, right? And I see that a lot, where especially in our R&D world, where we're all competing for dollars, and when there's a limited funding, then you start to get into this competitive, oh, my project's more important, or should be a higher priority. But trying to find value that helps overall and bring some harmony, I think helps. And I do want to, if I could go back real quick on Miranda's question, I love that. And I just want to add something. I love what Lan had to say. The other thing I would add to that is, when you are in college, volunteer. I mean, just like in the workplace, when you get into the workplace, I think back to my time in school, and you get kind of these. There's always in every team, there's always someone volunteering, wanting to lead, wanting to be the leader, and sort of, even if they're not the best qualified, they're always those who want to lead. And I think stepping up and leading, and being that different voice, I think is really important. So use those opportunities when you're in group projects. Maybe it's a club that you've joined. Volunteer for those positions sometimes, and don't be the leader volunteer that's the one just doing all the work behind the scenes. Be the leader that's actually leading, and I would say that is the person that you would want to be, and that's the thing that will help you, I think, when you get into the work.
Great. Thank you. Tying to the pipeline and questions that we talked a little bit about, how to suggest a workplace, getting visibility. There's one more question here around, how do we leverage and incorporate our rich traditions and culture for being more effective leaders and managers?
It's calling. I'm causing some echo. I think first thing is, don't be shy about your own heritage and culture, right? Embrace it and really enjoy it. If you enjoy it, other people will, find interesting, and you will attract other people to try to understand. And a lot of people I work with have a great degree of curiosity, and I find ways to talk about Chinese culture that makes it interesting, so they will try to learn about it. You can't be ashamed of it. It's like, even if we have, Kyle mentioned these H, right? The 4 H's, and it resonates very well. Sometimes I joke about it. Sometimes I make it's funny to juxtapose, these two emails, and you make fun of it. But it's celebrating your heritage. My parents are a very different person from my kids. Are very different, but we all have some common things, and I celebrate those and be vocal about it, so that people doesn't feel like, ooh, it's like a fringe niche community that is sort of on the fringe of the society. I think that's important.
That's a tough question in a way. I think it's bringing the value that you see from that culture into the workplace, and just like the last question, there's times when being someone who can bring harmony to a group that's not getting along can be really helpful, right? And being someone who can show some humility at times, especially in the international environment that we're in, and helping to educate other. One of the things we're trying to really focus on at Boeing, because we have international customers everywhere, is how do we use Asian employees to also help with in situations where we have international sales, or we're trying to understand some of these things. And so using that heritage to help others around understand the different cultures, I think is also another way to use that and to value, because I think most companies in the US these days are really expanding overseas, and whether it's through suppliers or customers, really there's a value that the Asian American community brings that is something that most white leaders don't recognize, right? It's just kind of like, I know what I'm doing. I know how to go make this sale, or I know how to go close this deal, and they're not understanding that culture. I have a Indonesian employee that I work with, and our CEO was calling her because as he was dealing with the Indonesian community, and sometimes he said she would get invited to the meeting just to be there, because in the community there was a comfort level of having someone who understood the culture. And she said, I wasn't involved in these negotiations, but just having me in the room made the other Indonesian suppliers feel more comfortable, and that helped the company. Right?
Totally.
So there's things like that to think about.
That's awesome. Our last but final question, since we're at time, is like kind of relevant to everything that we tied together. And we'd like to get your insight on what are the hallmarks for spotting managers who can grow into leaders? What are the key waypoints in the leadership journey, whether it's trial by fire or growing leadership for managers?
For me, it's pretty straightforward. It's, can they rally people, inspire people without authority? And can they think beyond their own areas of ownership?
Yeah, I would say similarly, someone who's willing to take on more responsibility, and a lot of we'll call it white space sometimes, is who are those leaders who are able to pick out those areas. I mean, everybody's got their individual responsibilities, but between groups, between organizations, there are things that aren't getting done. It's those leaders that are willing to step in and take on assignments that are outside their boundaries, or maybe even recognize them. I think that's one of the things I look for, is someone who sees these gaps in what we're doing and is willing to go fill it and do something about it.
Yeah, like connecting the dots, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Well, wow, I cannot believe we've been together for the last 90 minutes. I've learned so much. Thank you, Lan and Nyle, for the insightful talk about leadership. And I hope everyone here not only learn about leadership, but also get to know about CIE. And that's one of the main purpose for us, is to get more people engaged, not only in STEM, in leadership, but also to help younger generations. We have mentoring programs that we offer. We also have scholarships. And as I shared earlier, we've been working with Bellevue Mirror interns on the development program. And it is so important to get to not only know where you want to go and have guidance and insights from those who've been there, but also a lot of time it is also looking back to understand our culture, where we came from, and what are some of our DNAs that we either need to be able to amplify or to be able to be thinking about as we step into either our career growth or our personal growth. So thank you. I want to thank all of you for investing your weekend with us inside of Chinese New Year. Happy New Year. 新年快乐，恭喜发财，身体健康。We wish everyone good health and safety. I also hope to see you at our next seminar on February 27th, where Dr. Zhang and Dr. Liu will talk us through health challenges in the 21st century. Thanks, everyone.